Hello and welcome to Mindset and Muscles with Amanda. I am your host, Amanda Ferlisi. Welcome back. Welcome if it's your first time listening. I'm very excited for today's episode. I stole Garrett's wife. I don't know if anyone listens to my physical therapy series, but I stole Garrett's wife, Kaitlyn Labberton. I'm super excited to have you on. I did want to start with a little intro about you. Kaitlyn Labberton is the owner of Reclaim Her Physical Therapy based in Wellesley, Massachusetts. She's an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist, and she specializes in women's health. She particularly enjoys working with active women as well as providing care and support during pregnancy and postpartum. Kaitlyn, welcome and thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited for this. I don't know if anyone out there knows, but like women's health isn't like a studied thing as much as like men's health. So to have someone well versed in women's health and helping women is, it just speaks to me, obviously, because I'm a woman. But so I have lots of questions. I'm sure a lot of people do because we don't, as a whole, talk about pelvic floor health. I feel like no one ever was like, hey, Amanda, while I'm in like biology and psychology and all these things, we never talked about this. So could you tell me, I guess, like what the pelvic floor is and like what physical therapy of the pelvic floor is?
Yeah, absolutely. But you're totally right. Nobody talks about it. Even I just had a baby and they don't talk about it. So it's, in my opinion, definitely an underserved area of medicine and of physical therapy. But basically, the pelvic floor is a set of muscles. There's three layers, and it's a set of muscles on the bottom side of your pelvis. So basically the muscles that are responsible for sexual function, peeing, pooping, basically keeping everything working down there. But they're super important. And I think just because they're topics that we don't talk about,
Yeah.
don't talk about pelvic floor health at all. And it's become an area I'm super passionate about because a lot of women, especially, kind of suffer from different issues, whether that's like pain with sex
Mm-hmm.
or, a lot of like long distance runners or weightlifters leak pee when they exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
we just kind of deal with these things instead of doing something about them. So I'm super passionate about pelvic floor health and kind of spreading the word because you're right. Nobody talks about it.
No, literally. So as a trainer and being in the fitness industry for 10 years, even though I'm 25 and I'm not, but I had clients saying like, Amanda, like I have, because I mean, you hear it all, I'm assuming. I also hear a lot of things. And then sometimes I'm like, wow, we just really go right for it, huh? Some of my clients are like, wow, do you have pain during sex? And I'm like, well, and like I obviously you probably are the same, very open with your clients and patients, like because we have to be, right? So I'm like, maybe explain that, like what are you talking about? So but that, this was a couple of years ago, and from that point on, a lot of my clients that had pain during sex, pain while lifting, or general pain ended up going to a pelvic floor therapist. And I was like, wow, like I've actually never heard of that. And I am a woman. I've only ever been to a physical therapist like your husband or someone else along the lines, right? And I'm like, this is like something we don't talk about. So can you talk to us about? So I'll give you an example. One of my friends a couple years ago actually said she was dealing with all these issues, like I guess she was getting like certain like infections, I guess, or like certain things were happening, right? Not to get into like too nitty gritty, whatever. Um, and then after a year, she was finally diagnosed with something. I honestly don't remember what it was, but she saw a pelvic floor therapist. So can you talk to us about how fitness can play a role in the pelvic floor and what like signs to look for?
Yeah. So a lot of times, in terms of pain, I'll get a lot of people who might have already been to an orthopedic physical therapist, kind of like what we think of as standard physical therapy. But the pelvic floor is really part of your core. So just like we would work on our abdominal muscles for stability, and if you had back pain or hip pain, we'd obviously focus on our abdominals. Our
Mhm.
pelvic floor is really part of that. And I started off as an orthotherapist before I went into pelvic floor, and for whatever reason, it's just like this missing piece of the puzzle that we ignore, and it plays a big role in the stability of our pelvis. So I think like active women, and when we're thinking about it from a fitness perspective,
Mhm.
things to kind of look out for would be any sort of pelvic pain, um, anything like, sometimes weightlifters will leak a little bit of pee when they lift something heavy. That could be a pelvic floor issue. Pain with sex. And like, I think a lot of times people think of pelvic floor like, oh, then I have to feel pain like vaginally or
Mhm.
something. But that's not necessarily the case. It could be what you think of as standard back pain or hip pain. Because
Really?
some of the muscles in our pelvic floor refer pain to our backs or our hips, or definitely like around the SI joint. So I always recommend, if you've had ongoing pain in these areas and say you've tried traditional PT and it hasn't helped, get a pelvic floor evaluation, because it could be like, I found trigger points in women's pelvic floor muscles that we release it and they're like, oh my God, my back pain feels so much better.
I'm literally like, I don't know if you, like, so you're talking to me and I'm just like, I wonder if that pain is that like cause I mean, you probably did this when you were in school, right? Like, you're like, oh, nope, have that. Yep. 100% have that.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
yeah, I did that when I was pre-med. And then especially when I switched to psychology, like, oh yeah, I have all those things. Um, but I'm like sitting here, like wiggling my hips back and forth. I'm like, wow, what if that is really that? And I'll never forget one of my clients that actually, uh obviously I'm not going to say her name because she went to Garrett for hip stuff. She ended up having to go to a pelvic floor therapist within the same clinic as him, and she would tell me things. I'm like, what? You did what? And she's like, I feel so much better. And then she ended up moving and she saw a pelvic floor specialist too, and it, like, all of her pain that she complained about, obviously because she's in pain, gone.
Yeah,
I looked at her and I'm like, shut up.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
So, so when you say like it can refer pain, wow. I'm just like trying to think like how you're, because, okay, so I guess for people out there that don't know, what is your pelvis? Like what area of the body? Because I know some people are going to be like, is it above your belly button? Is it below your belly? So can
Yeah,
you
yeah,
explain that?
sure. Yeah, it's so your pelvis is below your belly button. It's kind of, think about it from like your low back down to like just below your hips.
Okay.
It's kind of a bony structure in between. So your pelvic, the hard part about the pelvic floor, and probably why a lot of people are resistant to get treatment, is the best way to assess it is with an internal exam.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to like if you went for a gynecology visit and they do an internal exam, it's the same thing, but we're assessing your muscle function. We're not doing a medical exam. So we're seeing how strong your muscles are, if they have any tension in them. They can get trigger points, just like your upper back can get a trigger
Wow.
point. Yeah, so it's really crazy. And oftentimes I feel like women have really tight pelvic floors because
Mm-hmm.
it's a that we hold stress. So like if you think of people like, or like, oh, I hold stress in my
They're
shoulders,
like
or
this. Yeah.
yeah, or like I clench my jaw all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the pelvic floor. We like often clench those muscles and then they're too tight and not working properly or causing pain.
And we literally have no idea because it's not something that we ever talk about because
Oh,
it's like taboo to talk about
yeah,
women's health. It's a vagina. It's like,
right,
oh no, we can't talk about that, even though that's like where we come out of. It's fine. Um,
right.
so back to, I guess, the beginning. So you have your own clinic. So tell me when you opened up your own clinic and what went into that and how long you've been a business owner, because obviously as a fellow business owner, there's a lot of stress in that.
Oh, yeah.
And I also don't know what it is like on your spectrum of things as far as physical therapy. So tell us the story.
Yeah. So, I've been practicing for 8 years now. And I started off as an orthopedic physical therapist, and then started getting into the world of pelvic floor because, like I said, it was kind of a missing piece of the puzzle that I was either referring women out to see a pelvic floor specialist or kind of wondering as I was treating them, like, is this an issue? Like, is this contributing to your problem?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go back and get my training in pelvic floor PT. But then I found out in the pelvic floor realm, it kind of becomes, you're either an orthotherapist or you're a pelvic floor therapist.
Oh.
And even like when you schedule a visit at a lot of clinics, they'll say, oh, what are you coming for? Oh, that's a pelvic floor issue. So I'll schedule you the pelvic floor therapist. But really, like when I do an evaluation with people, I'm doing kind of more of an orthopedic exam and a pelvic floor exam to see if any issues are kind of overlapping or contributing to the other. And so I think the reason I kind of embarked on pursuing my own business is that didn't I didn't think they should be separate. I don't think you're just an ortho patient because you have back pain, or I
Yep.
don't think you're just a pelvic floor patient because you have pain with sex.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to give better, more well-rounded care. So that was kind of my reason behind starting my own practice. And I started last fall. After a lot of kind of going back and forth, I also decided to start a business when I was pregnant. So
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had a child yet or whatever, but I know that like there's a lot of hormones going on, and Garrett was probably like, just do it. And here we are, which is amazing because a lot of people don't, take that risk. And especially when you're passionate about something like you are, I don't know if anyone's watching this because like my YouTube channel has like 3 views, but you should go check it out. Her eyes are lighting up like how I light up when I talk about anything fitness and health related. So just so you know, like you can see the passion through the screen. So that's how you know you made the right decision. What obviously it's a financial risk. It's like a mental health risk because it's stressful. But
right.
here you are. So you said last fall while you were pregnant.
While I was pregnant, just starting to really ramp up right when I had to take maternity leave. So that was another kind of hit and setback. But I always think back, I was going to acupuncture at the time when I was first pregnant. And I was telling her, because she's owns her own business. And I was telling her, I was like, I think I'm crazy. I think I'm crazy for trying to be pregnant with my first kid. I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm starting my own business all at the same time. And she told me, she was like, no, Kaitlyn, like these are all good stressors. Like you want to have a family, you want to have a business, you're
Mm-hmm.
passionate about all of it. Like there's a difference between stress that brings you down and stress that kind of propels you forward. And she was like, I actually think it's a great time for you to start a business. And I've just kind of run with that. Like that quote kind of has stuck with me through this process, and I love it.
That literally gave me goosebumps because like what better time than now, especially when you're already like so passionate.
Right.
I don't know. Can you hear that? Is there like static on this right now?
I don't hear it.
Okay, I think it just might be coming from your end. It's totally fine. But like, what better time than now to do it? Like, especially, I know okay, so how did you deal with, obviously, you had your baby, it was in January?
January. Yep.
Okay, so talk a little bit about how you started your business in the fall and then you're like, okay, having my baby, see you later. How did you manage all of that?
Yeah, I I think I set my expectations for the fall more as trying to lay the groundwork. So rather than being so worried about, ramping up a patient caseload, I was seeing a few clients, but more so I was trying to lay the groundwork with marketing and reaching out to different people to network with, and kind of, I'm based in Wellesley, but I hadn't worked in Wellesley myself before. So reaching out to people in the community. And I think just kind of embracing the fact that it was an expected hiccup that was going to
Hmm.
come along, and not to get too down on it because it was something happy that was happening.
Yeah, of course.
Tough time all the time for unexpected things that come up, and just because this one was expected and great doesn't mean it was going to be any less difficult to get through as a business owner. But I think in a way, like it kind of made me feel a little more legit. Like, oh, look, here I am pregnant. Here I am going through all these things that you're going through.
Yes, I can relate to you. I will talk to you about my own personal things that happen after I have my child. But for now, this is what I'm doing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's amazing. And do you feel as though you're able to relate to your clients more now because you already you had a child, so you're probably so you can relate to them? And then I have another question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I was a dancer growing up. Dancers, ironically, have a lot of pelvic floor issues too. So I feel like I was able to relate to people who hadn't had babies that were confused why they had pelvic floor issues. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was also obviously able to relate after I had my own. And it's it's different, but also still all in the realm of women's health and stuff nobody talks about.
So I guess my question, I'm going to skip the other question because you answered it, but why do you think there's such a lack of women's like studies in women's health? I know I feel like there's like obvious answers, but like when I tell you, like I never heard of pelvic, I probably would have never until I told you I had a couple clients and friends that had to see a pelvic floor specialist. And then had I not ever met your husband, I literally probably would never know because I don't have any clients that go to a pelvic floor specialist as of right now, except for the other ones. So why do you think there's this gap?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer, but I think some of it's just the way our society is. It's kind of a have a you might have an issue but keep plugging forward, or um it's the for me the education really isn't there. Like I do a lot of community outreach events, and people are shocked. Like I was at a baby expo a few weeks ago,
I saw
and
that. That was adorable.
and people were coming up to me being like, what's pelvic floor? And I like talk about new business owner, like realizing where my mistakes are. But I was standing there thinking like, oh, this is my mecca of like where I'm going to meet
Mm-hmm.
potential clients. And here they were not even knowing what pelvic floor was, and not even knowing that like maybe they needed me or maybe they needed help.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lack of education. I think that's part of the problem. And I think there's this kind of societal pressure of like, women have to do it all. And maybe you're doing it with pain, and maybe you're doing it and it's not convenient for you, but you kind of have to keep plugging along. And like in other countries, you have a baby and it's the automatic referral to a pelvic floor specialist
Really?
at your postpartum visit. Like everybody has one. And in the
I see. I
US,
had no idea.
I know, because in the US, it's like not even talked about unless the patient asks or unless they seek out care. Like in Massachusetts, it's direct access to physical therapy. So you could go to a pelvic floor therapist and technically never tell your doctor, but it's doctors aren't really recommending it for whatever reason. There's kind of a lot of this like, oh, that's normal. And oh, yeah, that's really common. And like, just because something's common and it doesn't mean it's normal, and it doesn't mean that it's
No.
untreatable. Your
I'm
eyes
just
right now.
I'm just like, and this is coming from someone that's like, you don't know this about me, but I'm super scared of doctors. Like I had one bad experience and that like I chalked it up. Like I was like, no, I'm never telling anyone my things, my problems, my feelings, nothing. So like to even talk about this for me is a lot. However, the fact that other countries like are like, okay, you have a baby, you go see a pelvic like that honestly it blows my mind because I feel like we do a lot of things good as a society, forget like countries, like just as women and people, like we're taught how to, I mean, not the best how to eat, even though there's like all these fads, but like we don't take care of our bodies from the inside out.
Right.
And it's sad that there's such a gap, but this is why we're here to talk about it, to get the awareness out there, because just from having a couple of clients and friends that had those issues, I'm sure like I mean, I don't want to have anything wrong, but like I have anxiety. I literally, your husband would be like, just relax. And I'm like, I am. And he's like, that's funny because like you're not. And so like just that alone is probably like I probably need to come and see you, honestly. So just knowing that like we could have things wrong with us and not even fully know is it's just wild that we don't talk about this. And I mean, do you see like, do you ever struggle with like, I'm trying to figure out how to word this, like, because what you're in, like your industry is so not taboo, but like just not talked about. Do you ever feel like an internal struggle where you want to help everyone, but like you also don't want to, like, you don't know how to go about it, I guess? Do you know what
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to ask you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every time I meet a new client for the first time, it's like trying to read the room. There's a lot of things that, even probably with their gynecologist, like they don't bring up. Like maybe they tell their gynecologist they have pain with sex,
Mm-hmm.
but are they asking them if they use lube? Are they asking them if different positions hurt? Are they asking them if they have pain with orgasm? Like, no, these are really invasive questions, but for me, give me a lot of information on the muscle function. But when you're meeting someone for the first time, obviously I want to give them great treatment and actually help their problem. But I
Mm-hmm.
can't get that if I don't have all the information. And oftentimes I'll find like, you know, 3 visits down the line, they're like, remember when you asked me this the first day? Yeah, actually that does happen.
Yeah, because they're
Okay.
probably like, oh my God, this is so
Yeah.
weird. I'm telling her that it hurts when I'm in missionary position. And like, I can't tell her that, but I'm going to tell her now because like this happened last night. Yeah. No, like, because I mean, I get it because like we don't really talk about those things. I mean, again, and like my clients tell me about like their poop and like sex, all like we talk about everything, but like sitting in front of someone and you're just like, does it hurt when you do this? You're like, no.
Right.
I can
Exactly.
imagine. Like they're just like, oh no. And then you're like, I'm just trying to help you. Like, let's
Right.
figure it out together. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
what you're doing is incredible. I mean, again, that's why I asked you to be on this podcast because I wanted to spread women's health. So I have another question because you're also a business owner. Do you ever feel okay, this is like, I'm not trying to bring the conversation down, but like, do you ever feel like throwing in the towel at all and like not talking about pelvic floor and being like, I'm just going to talk about another aspect, the orthopedic, right? I'm just going to talk about orthopedic therapy. Like, do you ever feel like doing that?
Yeah, sometimes, I think being your own business owner, everything falls on you, right? So like you're doing marketing, you're doing the one-on-one care, you're doing outreach, you're doing the like financial side of things. Like you're it, right? So I think that comes with really high highs and some really low lows.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really easy to, I mean, ask Garrett. He complains all the time that I'm like, some days I come home and I'm like, yes, like this is what I
Of
was meant.
course.
And then there's other days I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is ever going to work out, So I think that's natural for me at least to
Mm-hmm.
kind of have those moments of self-doubt because, really what I'm trying to do to some extent is kind of create better care that's not yet the norm. So I think it's really hard to be doing something um, either, whether it's kind of different, a different model, or maybe it's a little taboo. I think it's really hard to kind of be working against those things, even if it's for the better and even if it's to help women and, advocate for women's health. That does make it harder, I think, sometimes when you're doing something kind of against the grain.
Of
Because
course.
how can you convince someone, and I often find this as a PT, like if their doctor doesn't recommend a pelvic floor evaluation postpartum, why would they just come to a PT? If it's just up to them, why would they come? Or why they don't even know why, but they kind of take the doctor's advice or no advice is
Of
kind of what
course.
they should be doing. um so, or, if a doctor tells them, oh yeah, it's normal for this to be happening, then they just kind of live with it. And so I think it's hard to get the education out there and kind of reach people of like, no, there is something you can do. And right now, at least in this country, you just kind of have to take it in your own hands and seek care.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. So I guess because of what you specialize in and because you're kind of working against the grain in a lot of aspects, how have you been able to build up your business and maintain your current patients? Like how did you, I guess, how did you build your clientele and then retain everybody?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm finding a lot there's a lot more value in my industry with word of mouth than maybe like how some traditional PT clinics advertise. A lot of times people, get good traction with Google reviews, but maybe somebody doesn't want to write a Google review about this and what I helped them with.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting a little bit more creative, and definitely I think my most success so far has been word of mouth. And kind of doing some of these community like outreach events. I'll go to gyms or, places that, women, all women gyms, or, have some community, people that I know who were like, oh yeah, we'd love for you to come give a talk or something, and trying to reach out a little bit more directly to the potential patient rather than going through like doctor's offices, or because it's hit or miss. You don't know, if that's not how they've practiced up until this point to refer people to pelvic floor PT, why would they start it now if they're, 20 years into their career? So I found more traction kind of building up my business, going directly to the source, and then also word of mouth.
I mean, I think word of mouth in whatever business or product you buy is the best, because if I, just an example, if I put this eyeliner on and my best friend sees it, she's like, wow, that eyeliner is fire. Like, where'd you get that? She's going to buy it. And then it's just going to be a ripple effect. And that's the same with how I grew my business, because I grew a business out of my house. So like, I wasn't advertising, like, come to my house and train with me. Like it was all word of mouth, and people are going to trust that so much more than if I post an ad on Instagram or whatever it may be. But those are the clients that you want to be with anyway, because they're like, oh yeah, Lauren comes to me, Brittany comes. Like, you have like a whole little community in itself. And
Right.
I think that for any business, and especially in like women's health, that's probably the best way, because you're doing something that people don't really know about, and they're like, okay, well, you feel great, all right, so like, I'm gonna do this.
Right.
And it's amazing. So you mentioned like a couple minutes ago, you're like, oh, and the social media notes, how do you feel juggling CEO, uh social media manager, networking manager? Like, how do you manage all that? Because I just, the last girl that I had on, we had the same question, because like sometimes I feel like I'm spinning, and then by 10 o'clock I'm like twitching, because like I don't even know what I did. Like, I'm sure you can relate. So how do you manage that? Or maybe still trying to figure it out? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, definitely still trying to figure out. I think add like my almost 6-month-old son into the mix. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to get it done when I have time.
You're like, I go on Instagram when I'm in the shower and Garrett's watching the baby. Like,
Right.
I'll post something real quick. I get on.
I think like, definitely using any free time I have to just do something. I kind of have this ongoing list of like different categories. And obviously if something's like time, there's a time component to it and it's more pressing, I prioritize that. But otherwise, like, I shoot for an Instagram post like twice a week, or something on Instagram. I usually have some sort of free event going on that I'm promoting. Like this summer I'm doing a birth prep course, so like I'm promoting that right now. But I try to have some structure, and then if it falls through the cracks 1 week or 2 weeks, it's fine, and try to give myself some grace.
Of
But
course. I mean, you're Superwoman, you own a business and you have a child and a relationship. So like, you're trying to do everything. And then on top of all of that,
trying and admitting that it's really hard and maybe impossible to do all of it, but I love all the components of it, so putting time to it doesn't, it's definitely work sometimes, but some parts don't feel like as much work.
I mean, I can understand that. Are you part of like any networking groups? Like, how do you find these events that you're going to?
Yeah, so I just formed like kind of this informal networking group. My sister-in-law is a lactation consultant, so we kind of formed this like postpartum group that I'm working with her, this like other dietitian, a postpartum doula, and a mental health counselor. And every so often we put on a free event for postpartum women to just kind of get more information out there. It's all meant to be like education based, but they've kind of become a nice little network that, you know, when one of us has a client that is saying like, you know, oh, I'm just feeling like so anxious all the time postpartum, like I feel like I can't manage everything. I'm like, oh great, here's this person's name that I work with all the time and she's awesome. And so that network has been really great. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'd say that's been my most helpful
I mean, it sounds like you have a really good community because you need all of those individuals and you can probably bounce some ideas off each other, but also like a really good referral base. And
Yeah.
I obviously like, there's like three things you mentioned that I don't specifically know like what they are, but I know that's like after you have a child or like having a child, like you need to go see. So I mean, that sounds incredible. Like you could have your own like baby, like postpartum event like every single month. You could probably go to like I went to a bridal expo. That was intense.
Yeah.
But like things like that, I mean, you just kind of figure things out, like roll with the punches. And I feel like that's a lot about being a business owner. You just start to figure things out. You're like, oh, that seems like it could work. And then it's like, nope, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to
Right.
take a right down this road and I'm going to try that. I
Right.
honestly, every day, like I literally, I'm not even kidding. I just literally just finished up with my client at 5. And I was like, I watched a YouTube video. Like I had no business watching this YouTube video because like I had work to do, but like my ADHD was like, we're gonna watch this woman talk about how she made $80,000 in a month. And this woman, I know I can't help it because I
I
watch
get
like
those
I
two.
got sucked right in. I'm like, what did you do? Tell me everything so I can do that and fly around the world, right? And she literally like she posted like she showed you. She's like, so I have a dog Instagram, and I'm like, that you did it. My mind was I was like angry that I never did it, right? And then I was like, you're kidding, right?
Right.
She made almost 40 something $1,000 off Instagram reels for her dog's account on Instagram. I was so mad. I grabbed my dog. I go, you better like freshen up. Like we got things to do, right? Anyway, I don't even know how I got on the topic, but like I was watching this. I'm like, this is crazy. And then I'm like, wait, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
Clearly I don't have an Instagram that's famous for my dog who should be famous, right? But yeah. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. I just was like so blown away by that. And it's like sometimes I feel like I'm not doing all the right things. But then I'm like, no, I'm fine. I don't need to make Frank famous on Instagram. He's cute. It's fine. Like, I don't need to. But like, you feel that way though, right? You're like, I don't know what
Sure.
I'm doing. And I'm going to
And,
watch this YouTube video.
and you also like feel like you don't necessarily know what's gonna work. So you're
Yep.
just like, and I'd say in the past month, I did one event that I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a home
Yep.
run. It was like crickets. And then I did something else that I was like, ugh, I don't even want to prepare for this. Like, no one's gonna come. And that was like amazing. So you just don't know. And I don't think until you try and just like accept that there's gonna be some belly flops and failures on the way, like you have to.
Oh yeah, like I was like if you like we were saying earlier, like if you don't take that leap or jump, like you're never gonna know. Like I did a bridal expo, and I will say I didn't really get much traction off of it just yet. I have hope. I have hope. But I have this whole service that I send. I like create this nice little like email, and it'll tell me people that unsubscribe, and I'm just like I'm looking at the number. I got like really upset. I'm like 33 people were like that mad. Wow. I was like, hey, like something sweet. And I'm like, all right, well, we're just taking it on the chin and moving forward. That didn't stick for that person. But
Right.
right. It can be like disheartening. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm not for everybody. And apparently that particular thing isn't going to work. But let's move on to making the dog Instagram reels. Um, I can't. Like I literally can't. I'm gonna send this to you on Instagram after because like my mind was so blown with this moment. I was like, hey, what? And then I just posted an Instagram reel, right? Because I apparently I monetize off Instagram reels. I'm like, I made $47 off my reel. This woman's like 35,000. But like you gotta laugh at it sometimes, right?
Right.
Because you know, when we're trying to start our own business and like maintain a business, we're just rolling with the punches and like throwing, what does it say? Like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. It
Yes.
can be stressful. So what do you find is like your biggest stress relief throughout, this whole journey? Because obviously you're juggling a lot of things. So like, is there anything every day that you do that you're like, this is my time?
I take the longest showers now. I've never taken such hot and such long showers.
You're like, I might cry, I might laugh, but I'm in there for a long time.
You never know, but it's like too long. And the water always is cold at the end because I've been running.
Stop.
That's mama's time.
But you need it.
Need it. And I'd say now, like, gosh, almost 6 months postpartum, I'm like just trying to get into some sort of regular exercise routine again. But that's kind of been hit or miss for me right now because it's so hard not to be frustrated and just kind of down at like knowing what my body used to be able to do and being like way below that level. So while that's typically something that's like a great me time and kind of a stress reliever, it's kind of hit or miss, like what mood I'm in lately.
I mean, I can understand that. I mean, I think not even just, obviously I've had a lot of clients that have had children and, I, at this moment right now, I can't relate, but I can relate to being like at different levels of fitness, right? And then kind of feeling a little disheartened. Like I used to be able to press 40-pound dumbbells and weigh 115 pounds. I'm like, where did that all go? Like I was in the gym and because I had like injuries or whatever setback. And I'm like, shit, like I can literally, this guy's 25 pounds is a lot. But like, I think you make a really good point. It's tough to get back into a certain routine, a certain structure, because like you're so focused on like, wow, I used to be able to do this. But I mean, again, back to the whole give yourself a little grace because you like created a human, and like you now, like, yeah, and you like take care of like a human also on top of you, on top of a husband, because guys can't take care of themselves. I learned that real quick. I love you, Maurizio. But yeah, it's a lot of work. So, I mean, as far as your fitness journey or aspect or whatever you're trying to get back into, like give yourself a little grace and be like, okay, like I can't run 17 miles anymore. Like let's start with a quarter of a mile. And like I tell a lot of my clients this because I also have clients that, used to run marathons and now whatever happened, they're not doing it right now. And I'm like, okay, but like you can't just like hop on the treadmill and run 15 miles. Like your body doesn't do that. So hold on, we lost Kaitlyn for a second. Just for a second. Kaitlyn, can you hear us? Me? Oh, I can hear you. There you go. You're coming back. I think, yeah, just there's just a slight hiccup. I didn't move anything. It just might have been a service thing, but we're back. Yeah, we were just talking about how men can take care of themselves. We love you. But yeah, I mean, just show yourself grace and like putting yourself in like checking yourself in a positive way. Like you're gonna get back to where you were, and then most of the time better. So I can understand. I do take long showers now too, but that's because I put my phone in there and I watch these stupid YouTube videos. You do that too, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Like there's something so satisfying about I put the phone, it goes like this, ready? And it clicks in. And I don't even know what I'm watching. Sometimes it's fitness, sometimes it's business, but I'm like in the shower, just like, but it's so relaxing because it's quiet. There's like, I don't even know how I'm going to function with children like you do. Like no one's bothering me, but I'm watching the fitness YouTuber or the business one telling me how to make $100 million in a day, but I can relate to the showers. So another question, completely like going all the way to the right. So where do you see like your business heading? Like where do you see yourself in like say a year or 5 years down the road? Like what would you like to do?
Gosh, I would love to hire a couple PTs, and kind of expand my business. I think, while I'm really passionate about this as a career, I've also kind of went into PT and working for myself to be able to juggle a little bit of a work-life balance and also be home part-time to raise my son. So I would love to be able to hire some people in the future and expand a certain amount so that I can have, the business kind of growing and being successful, even if I'm not physically here in the space all the
Sure,
time.
yeah.
And I think that was another thing I realized during maternity leave of like, if I have to take time off, like my clients are just kind of hanging for a couple months till I come back. So to kind of be able to have some backup support for whatever comes my way in life would be nice. But I think like, I don't have these like grand aspirations of opening multiple clinics or kind of really
Not
going for,
yet.
not yet, right? Not, but like, I think, I don't know, not necessarily going for the quantity, or if I did expand in that capacity, like, I don't know that that's in the next like 1 to 3 years, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to establish good quality and a good reputation before kind of pushing the numbers, I guess, so to speak.
Absolutely. And then I guess for anyone listening or watching, what would you say are like symptoms to look for? I know you said like a couple, but like just to reiterate so people know like when they should maybe, because their doctor might not tell them to, like when they should see a pelvic floor specialist in
Yeah.
Wellesley, Massachusetts, reclaim her PT. So when should they come and see you?
Yeah, so any sort of like pelvic pain, back pain, even sometimes abdominal pain, like if you've had an abdominal surgery or like a C-section or something, sometimes your pelvic floor can be affecting that as well. Um, I'd say any postpartum woman should have a pelvic floor evaluation, but in terms of just like general symptoms, even if you've never had children, certainly any of that pain with sex, any sort of like leaking pee or poop, or like you have like a really urgent need to go to the bathroom, like say the like one I hear all the time is like, oh, I like pull into my driveway and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I have to pee like right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like your body shouldn't have that kind of like switch that turns on that fast to pee. So if you have any sort of like urgency to pee, I would see a pelvic floor therapist. And then another big one which is common in postpartum women, but also in like people who lift weights, is kind of a feeling of pelvic heaviness and kind of like, I don't know, just feeling like something's really heavy, or almost sometimes if it's really bad, people describe it as like they feel like something's going to fall out of their vagina or something, but
Really?
nothing's in there. Like it's almost like if you had a tampon in, that it's like feels like it's falling out or something. So that's another
I'm gonna
that's
look
another
for that one.
yeah,
Oh
that's
my God.
another pelvic floor issue.
Actually, that didn't make me think of a question, but that's horrifying. I put those poor women. Do you think it'd be a good idea if someone say, like for me, like down the road, when you're trying to have a child or like right before, do you think you should have a pelvic floor exam to make sure? Because again, I don't really know much about the whole,
Yeah.
like baby process, but that's something you should see.
Yeah, absolutely. I generally advertise my services as preconception through postpartum care. So, like before you even try to conceive, or during pregnancy, or after. Um, the, especially like anyone who's been active their whole lives, like you just want to make sure your pelvic floor is working properly, right? Like I think we as active people, like we often kind of have like, oh yeah, my right hip's always been tight, or like, yeah, my left shoulder always clicks or something. But like that's true of your pelvic floor too. So I think kind of making sure you're at a good baseline before you even get pregnant, or even during pregnancy, is a great idea. And another thing I do with women is I call it like birth prep, but
Mm-hmm.
basically teaching them, if they're in the early stages of their pregnancy, like, all right, how can we make sure like your core and your pelvic floor is ready to support a pregnancy? And then kind of further along, okay, how can we help your body prepare for delivery and to have, the least traumatic delivery possible. And just kind of like prep your body the same way you would prep it for like a marathon, right? Because like labor and delivery can be a marathon. I was in the hospital for 48 hours before I had my son. So you got to prep for that.
Honestly, that just gives me like the really bad goosebumps because just the thought of all of that is like horrifying to me. That's why I was like, I wonder if like I probably should come and see you for like because like pain, just things, right? I'm a female, but like prepping to have a child, like because so are you saying that you could help with like see, I don't know, like the pain of like birth, like what would the benefit of that be?
Yeah. So really like, some things that can happen with childbirth is you can have some tearing or like injury to the pelvic floor. So there are some things you can do to kind of prepare the muscles for that, like work on stretching the muscles a bit. I always teach people like breathing techniques and pushing techniques to help minimize that. So it's a lot of labor and delivery is a lot of scary stuff that people either don't know about going into it or they're terrified of it happening. So I like to think of birth prep as kind of giving some of the power back to the woman of like, all right, yeah, some shit can hit the fans during this, but like, here's some things that you can do to actually help and like kind of just take back some control in a situation where like you really don't have a lot of control.
Wow. My mind from this conversation, like I didn't really have like any knowledge going into this. And now I'm like, what's that over there? That pain. And I'm like, just like, I'm sure, right? Like people are probably listening to this and thinking like, huh. So I did want to wrap up, but I did want to ask, what would you want to leave our listeners or viewers with? Some words of wisdom, can be anything.
Yeah, I would say if you have any of these issues, don't be embarrassed. If you seek a pelvic floor evaluation from a therapist, they have heard whatever you are going to tell them before and more. So try your best not to be embarrassed. No, and find someone you click with, right? Like it's obviously super intimate topic and it's I've been to pelvic floor PT myself. I am a pelvic floor therapist and I was still nervous to go the first time. Like we expect that. So I think, don't try to give them all the information because that's just going to help your care, and don't live with something just because you're too embarrassed to go. Like be your own advocate, women's health all the way. You got it.
I love this. Kaitlyn, I really appreciate you being on my podcast. You are clearly passionate about what you do and your aura. Like I'm seeing it through the screen, everything. And I appreciate what you do for women and women's health. So if anyone has any questions, I'll have the information of your email, your Instagram below. And again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Mindset and Muscles with Amanda. And I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And have a great day.